Today we're going to look at Practice Test 1, the Math Calculator section, only heart of algebra questions, and there are 11 of them. Number 4. If 16 plus 4x is 10 more than 14, what is the value of 8x? The key idea here is figuring out what 10 more than 14 is. So that's 10 more than 14, so 14 plus 10. So we know that 16 plus 4x is equal to 24. There's a couple different techniques to solve this. We could solve for x all by itself and then plug that into 8x. We also might notice that 8x is double 4x. So what if I subtract 16 from both sides? This cancels out. I have that 4x is equal to 8, and I simply double it, times 2 on both sides. This gives me that 8x is equal to 16. Number 8. For what value of n is the absolute value of n minus 1 plus 1 equal to 0? So if we consider the absolute value of n minus 1 graphically, we'll draw our coordinate plane, and the minus 1 means that it's a horizontal translation, and we take the inverse of that, so we actually move to the right 1. And this is just a graph of y is equal to the absolute value of n minus 1. What do we notice about this graph? It never goes below the x-axis. So if we consider that this term plus 1 has to be equal to 0, well, let's solve for this by subtracting 1 from both sides. So we have the absolute value of n minus 1 plus 1 is equal to 0. We're going to minus 1 cancels out. The absolute value of n minus 1 is equal to a negative 1. Do we see that happening on this graph? No, never. There's no such value of n. So questions 9 and 10 refer to the following information. You got this nice little graphic here that determines where to start and end with these multi-problems that refer to the same information. And that information is that a is equal to 1052 plus 1.08 t. The speed of a sound wave in air depends on the air temperature. The formula above shows the relationship between a, the speed of a sound wave in feet per second, and T, the air temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. At which of the following air temperatures will the speed of a sound wave be closest to 1,000 feet per second? So let's look back at our equation and go through what each of these variables mean. A represents the speed of a sound wave. That's where we're going to plug in this 1,000 feet per second. And T represents the air temperature. So it turns out that's what we're going to solve for. Let's plug that in now. 1,000 is equal to 1052 plus 1.08 t. To solve for this, I'm going to subtract 1052 from both sides. I get negative 52 is equal to 1.08 t. And we divide both sides by 1.08. Fortunately, this is the calculator version, so that's not too bad. When we do so, we get negative 48.1 is equal to t. So negative 48.1. Go back to our answer choices. That's closest here to B. Number 11. Which of the following numbers is not a solution of the inequality 3x minus 5 is greater than or equal to 4x minus 3? So inequalities work a lot like equations. There's a couple key differences, but they don't really come into play here, because we're not going to be dividing by any negative numbers. We want to get all of the x terms to one side and all of the numbers to the other. I'm noticing that my coefficient 4 is bigger than my coefficient 3, which tells me if I subtract 3x from both sides, I can avoid negative numbers, which is always a good thing. Cancels out on the left. I have negative 5 is greater than or equal to x minus 3. I'll do a similar thing to move these numbers, minus 3, over here to the left. I cancel that out by adding 3 to both sides. Be careful when you're adding to negative numbers. Remember, you're just getting closer to 0. So this gives us a negative 2 is greater than or equal to x. Another way of saying that is that x is less than or equal to negative 2. So negative 2 is equal, negative 3 is less than negative 2. Even though it's bigger, it's farther negative. And negative 5, similar story. The only one that doesn't fit is A. So So here we have a graph, the total cost of renting a boat by the hour. On the x-axis, we're looking at time in hours. The y-axis, the total cost in dollars. And the graph above displays the total cost C in dollars of renting a boat for h hours. What does the c-intercept represent in the graph? Well, normally this would be our x-axis down here and our y-axis up here. So h would be equivalent to x, and time often is, the independent variable. And c is equivalent to our y-axis. So when they talk about c-intercept, they're really asking for the y-intercept, which is another way of saying, where does this line cross the y-axis? Well, right here, 5. To take that a step further, what does that mean in the context of the rest of the graph? For word problems, the y-intercept represents the starting value or initial cost of doing something, a one-time recurring fee. A is our best choice. Number 16. Which of the following represents the relationship between h and c? So if we again label these axes as x and y, we can start off by thinking, okay, it's going to be c is equal to hx plus my c-intercept here. So how much do I increase each time I go over? What's my slope? We can use the change of slope formula to figure that out. Or, if we zoom in a little bit, we can make a little triangle and say I'm going up 3 and I'm going over 4. So if we're looking at rise over run, what's my fraction going to be? 3 over 4. I rise 3, I run 4. Let's try it again. I rise 3, I run 4. That's my slope. So I can write that as c is equal to 3/4 h. And I don't even have to go any farther, but notice the intercept here is 5, so that does make sense. Number 18, y is less than negative x plus a, y is greater than x plus b. In the xy plane, if 0, 0 is a solution to the system of inequalities above, which of the following relationships between a and b must be true? Well, let's solve this first inequality for a by adding x to both sides. Over here that cancels out, and I have y plus x is less than a. So we can move this up here. And let's solve the second equation. Y is greater than x plus b. This time we're going to subtract x from both sides, and we end up with y minus x, that cancels out, is greater than b. So if we move these up, we can now plug in, because we know that 0, 0 is a solution. So this becomes 0 plus 0 and 0 minus 0. Or in both cases, those just equal 0. And now if I want to put these together, a is larger than 0, but b is less than 0. So we can do that like this. Same idea, just rearrange things. So the chain rule of inequalities, if a is larger than 0 and 0 is larger than b, then therefore a is larger than b, which is the same thing here as a. Number 19, a food truck sells salads for $6.50 each and drinks for $2 each. The food truck's revenue from selling a total of 209 salads and drinks in one day was $836.50. How many salads were sold that day? We can set up this equation as 6.5s for salads plus 2d for drinks is equal to $836.50. And the other thing we know is true is that s plus d is equal to 209. Now we have a system of equations. Now you might notice that if we multiply this bottom equation by 2, so change this to 2s, 2d, and this becomes 418, we can subtract all three columns straight down and the d's are eliminated. This is great because then we'll be able to figure out how many salads. So let's do that. Subtracting straight down, I have 4.5s, the d's cancel out, and 836.50 minus 418 is 418.50. Then I will divide both sides by a 4.5, and I get s is equal to 93. Number 28, If the system of inequalities y is greater than or equal to 2x plus 1 and y is greater than 1/2 x minus 1 is graphed in the xy plane above, which quadrant contains no solutions to the system? Let's just sketch each of these graphs. The first one here we'll do in blue. Y is greater than or equal to 2x plus 1, so we're going to start here, and it's going to grow, and we're looking at everything above that. And then in red, we'll do y is greater than 1/2 x minus 1, so we're going to start down here, and looks like this. So we know we are greater than this, which means in red here, and we're greater than this. The only area with two colors is this area right here in green. Let's choose a larger. This area right here is where the overlap is. So the question is, which quadrant contains no solutions? We see some are here in quadrant 1, quadrant 2, and quadrant 3. The only answer is quadrant 4. Number 34. A local television station sells time slots for programs in 30-minute intervals. If the station operates 24 hours per day, every day of the week, what is the total number of 30-minute time slots the station can sell for Tuesday and Wednesday? So if we sell in 30-minute intervals, how many of those are there in an hour? So there are 2 30-minute intervals per 1 hour. And then we're going to multiply this by 24 hours, I'll put H, per 1 day. And we are only selling on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, so we're going to multiply that by 2 days per 1 week. Our units, hours, hours, days, and days will all cancel out. We'll be left with how many 30-minute intervals per week. So this is, if we multiply straight across the top, 2 times 24 times 2 is 96. And we have 1 straight across the bottom. That's why our correct answer is 96. 35. A dairy farmer uses a storage silo that is in the shape of the right circular cylinder above. If the volume of the silo is 72 pi cubic yards, what is the diameter of the base of the cylinder in yards? The formula we're using here is that volume is equal to pi r squared times height, or the area of the base circle multiplied by the height. We know a lot of the information. They told us the total volume is 72 pi, and we know that the height is 8, so we can plug in pi r squared times 8. From here, we are going to divide out a pi from both sides. This cancels out, and we're left with 72 is equal to r squared times 8. So we'll divide both sides by 8. On the right, this cancels out. On the left, 72 divided by 8, we get 9. So if the radius squared is 9, we're going to take the square root of both sides, and that's going to give us 3 is equal to pi. Or excuse me, equal to the radius. You might be tempted to put that as your answer, but remember they wanted the diameter. Remember that the diameter is twice the pi. So we're going to double this, and our diameter is going to be 6. And that is your final answer.